Hello and welcome back to the Tournament Center here at the Magic the Gathering World Championships held at PAX here in Seattle. I'm Brian Dave Marshall and I am joined by Hall of Famer-elect Eric Froehlich. He'll be going into the Hall of Fame in really just about 6 weeks now or so.
Sounds good.
Something like that at Pro Tour Battle for Zendikar. But right now, there's the World Championships at hand. You're 2-1 in Modern. And tell us about the deck that you brought to play these 4 Modern rounds with.
So I work with Shahar Shenhar, and we found black-white tokens to be the deck that we want to go into battle. Modern's a very diverse format. Black-white tokens has a lot of disruption. We like that because it gives you a lot of gaming against a lot of things. It's also a format that Lightning Bolt's a big card. And cards similar to that, Kolaghan's Command, Terminate, this 1-for-1 removal where Lingering Soul, Spectral Procession, they don't really care that much about 1-for-1 removal. So we want to make Lightning Bolts a little bit weaker, and yeah, the white sideboard cards are just pretty fantastic. So liked a lot of what black-white tokens was doing, and it's a deck that we ended up locking in on.
So you still get to play with some of the grindy cards from the black side of like the green-black decks, but then you get to play with these difficult to deal with threats.
Right, you get what is probably the best removal spell in Path to Exile. You get a lot of powerful cards like Bitter Blossom, Lingering Soul, Spectral Procession. Windbrisk Kites is a land we haven't seen a lot of, but great with a token strategy. And yeah, then you get a lot of good sideboard cards.
All right, well, let's go through it card by card and take a look at what happens. We'll start with the tokens. They are both black and white and tokens. Sometimes both there on the Lingering Souls. Talk about your creature base.
Yeah, these cards are just great against 1-for-1 removal. They present a lot of threats. You would love a way to make them a little bit bigger, but they all have evasion. They make several tokens. Bitter Blossom, of course, one of the most powerful cards ever printed, keeps churning out more card advantage. And yeah, if your opponents are playing a lot of removal like Lightning Bolt and Kolaghan's Command, Terminate, those type of 1-for-1 removal spells, these cards are going to get you a big advantage.
I think one of the things that's interesting to me about this deck, and it's just kind of an abstract observation, is we see a lot of the decks that are 3 cards, 2 cards, 1 card, maybe a couple 4 cards, but this is a really like redundant deck. Like a lot of the cards seem to sort of just provide the same effect, and you just have a lot of them.
Right, there's a lot of powerful token makers, and these are the best ones, so they're the ones that we focus on, but they're not very expensive. They do present pretty quick clocks left unchecked, and honestly, there's a lot of like 1-toughness creatures in the format. You look at a deck like Infect, Affinity, Nexuses, Nexusi, Nexusisms, but yeah, these block all of that against the red decks. You present a lot of blockers and just make it tough for those decks, and then against the decks that go big, they're not as strong, but at least their removal spells are not super effective against them.
Talking about making it tough, let's look at how you make some of these tokens bigger or better in this deck. Intangible Virtue, Auriok Champion, not really making them better, but you're gaining some more advantage off of them. Talk about this set of cards here.
Intangible Virtue is kind of what makes the deck tick. It's just extremely powerful. You get to play offense and defense, and if you're going to cast Lingering Souls and Spectral Procession, your creatures are just very big, and there's not very many early creatures that can profitably attack through 2/2 Vigilance Flyers. Auriok Champion, it's just a solid card. A lot of the removal is all black and red. A lot of the creatures are black and red. Against mono red, it's just very tough to beat this thing. Not the most powerful card in the deck. Not a lot of synergy with the Intangible Virtue, but turning off losing life with Bitter Blossom and gaining a bunch of life against a bunch of decks is it's good against aggressive decks, and it's tough to remove.
Have you guys put any penalties in place for if you miss Auriok Champion triggers?
I missed the very first one. I haven't played with the card in person yet, and he casts 2 creatures, and I'm like, gain a life. I'm like, yeah.
Gotta put a $1 in the tip jar for the team.
I'll remember to do that. I'll probably forget that too.
Sorin Solemn Visitor.
Yeah, this card's just great. I mean, it creates a token, and giving all your creatures +1/+1 lifelink when you have a bunch of creatures you're going wide, it's exactly what you want to do. It's just a threat that increases your clock dramatically, gives you lifelink so you win the races, and when that's not useful, it just presents some vampires.
How good is Vault of the Archangel in this card? I mean, it's one of the lands. Unusual for a land to migrate this far forward into the deck tech, but it seemed to fit with this group of cards here.
It ranges from phenomenal to really bad. I mean, you're playing black cards, you're playing Spectral Procession, so Vault of the Archangel is not always what you need. It's tough to play a bunch of colorless lands, but the effect is really strong. So allowing your tokens to trade with Tarmogoyfs and things like that is pretty fantastic, and the lifelink matters. So one of them ended up making the cut, but not enough room for more.
Okay, so we're 24 cards in. Let's take a look at the package, you talked about this ability to fight other decks here, Murderous Cut, Liliana. Talk about this package of cards.
Yeah, the first Murderous Cut, being able to have a Delve card, we're playing a bunch of fetch lands and a bunch of sorceries, so very good removal spell. The 7 disruption spells, the Thoughtseizes and the Inquisitions, just really strong, give you a lot of good early game, disrupt their plan, take away some of the things that might interact favorably with your Lingering Souls or similar. Path to Exile might be the best removal spell in the format, it's very close with Lightning Bolt. And Liliana is kind of just a value card, it's not fantastic in this deck, has good interaction with Lingering Souls. We run out of cards that are useful in our hand pretty early. Making them sacrifice a creature is really nice in a lot of matchups because there's a lot of big things that come out fast between Tarmogoyf, Tassigurger, Mag Angler, so having a couple Lilianas is basically a removal spell that can be card advantage in control matchups is why that ended up making the cut.
Yeah. All right, let's take a look at how you get this all working together. We'll talk about, we see all the fetch lands here, but talk about Windbrisk Kites.
Windbrisk Kites is just card advantage. You hear the term manland a lot, and we've been hearing it for a long time. That's the treetop villages, the Raging Ravines and Mutavault and Mishra's Factories if you go back real old school. And Windbrisk Kites is a manland. It doesn't turn into a creature, but it turns into cards. Haven of the Spirit Dragon, I believe it's called, is a big one from Standard where you get mana early on and late in the game you get to bring back a dragon. And that's part of what makes the dragon decks tick because you need a lot of lands, but you don't want to flood out, and that helps mitigate it. Windbrisk Kites, it's a problem that it comes into play tapped. That's not always fantastic, but the card advantage it provides when you have 3 creatures and you can cast it at instant speed, you can do a lot of powerful things. You're going to be drawing effectively the best card in the top 4. So you're looking at a free impulse in a land, and that's pretty fantastic.
Okay, so 8 fetch lands. Let's take a look at the rest of the lands here. 4 Godless Shrines, an Isolated Chapel, 2 Fetid Heaths, and then 4 basics.
Yeah, Fetid Heath is a nice land when you've got Auriok Champions, Spectral Processions, and Lilianas, but yeah, there's a price if you're going to have colorless lands, and if you play too many Fetid Heaths, you have more colorless lands. You sometimes run into problems with not having turn 1 black source. You Fetid Heath, Isolated Chapel, Windbrisk Kites, they all kind of come into play tapped in that way. And Vault of the Archangel doesn't help. So there are some downsides to the deck. You're playing a 2-color deck and the mana's not perfect, but Godless Shrines and Fetid Heaths, and they go a long way.
Okay, and let's take a quick look at the sideboard. Timely Reinforcements, more tokens in the sideboard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this card's just so good against red decks, gaining 6 life, presenting blockers. Yeah, it's just a really strong card. We've been seeing it for a long time.
More Liliana, Sundering Growth. So what is this card here for?
This is just a pretty fantastic card in a lot of matchups. Against Affinity, it's fantastic. And the Mirror, of course, it's great. I actually played Jahar in the tournament, and this is one of the bigger cards. But there's a lot of matchups where this card is quite good. It kills a number of important things. If you're talking about a Merfolk deck, it can kill Vial and Spreading Seas. A lot of people are playing Affinity. It's fantastic there. And it's just being able to actually kill a Plating or kill an opposing Bitter Blossom or maybe kill a Blood Moon. We didn't know if people would show up with things like Virulent Plague, Night of Souls Betrayal. These are really good cards against us. So
sure.
Sundering Growth is very good against those type of cards. And being able to populate just means you get an extra creature. So
more tokens.
Yep.
All right, Spellskite, a pretty obvious card. Let's talk about Zealous Persecution's become almost like a hallmark of this card. It's a card we've seen main deck sometimes.
Right. It's just basically an Anthem effect in a deck that has a bunch of tokens, so already good there. Not quite enough space to squeeze it into the main deck. We expected a lot of matchups where it wouldn't actually be great in because giving all your creatures +1/+1 till end of turn, if the second ability is not doing anything, that's not worth a card. But it's still a really powerful card. Very good against Lingering Souls, Affinity, Infect. Goblin tokens, if people play Storm, Empty the Warren, so lots of things there.
Rest in Peace seems like it could be a sweet card this tournament.
Yeah, we actually thought that people might show up with something like Living End. We thought the Gristlebrand deck was definitely going to be on people's radar. Didn't know if it would be their top deck or just in the top 3. So having access to a card like Rest in Peace is pretty nice. It's also good in the Grixis matchups because they have a lot of Delve creatures and Snapcaster mages. And so, yeah, the Rest in Pieces can do a lot of work.
And then a couple of, old-fashioned color hose removal spells there. Yeah. So. Deck looks sweet. Anything you would have changed, in hindsight?
We ended up going up from 2 Auriok Champions to 4, expecting more people to might play something like Mono Red or aggressive decks. That didn't really seem to be the case, so maybe a little bit more disruption instead of Auriok Champions. It's one of the weaker cards in the deck, but other than that, pretty happy. Our sideboard's pretty great. We wanted more catch-alls and played some things against Infect that weren't just isolated on Affinity, so we could have just played the pure anti-Affinity cards. It would have worked out better, but other than that, the metagame is a lot of what we expected. I forgot to mention Sundering Growth against the Boggles Hexproof Aura deck is another nice one, so have a lot of good things going on there, and yeah, people are playing a lot of what we expected. We expected a lot of oddball decks they showed up, and I think we're pretty prepared.
Cool. Eric Froehlich, thank you so much for giving us a little bit of insight into black white tokens. I'm Brian David Marshall, signing off from the Tournament Center.